Hello everyone. In my last video, I was talking about sponsor application forms. I will link this video in the description below. So in my video for today, I will talk about principal applicant application forms. Principal applicant, he is the person who will be sponsored by the sponsor. We have 5 applications, so we will go through every application form. So let's start it with the generic application form for Canada. Application details, program under which you are applying. So you choose, is it family, economic, refugee, other. So we are talking about common law partner sponsorship. You can apply this for spouse sponsorship, conjugal partner sponsorship, all of them under family, class, or program. Category under which you are applying, as you see, spouse, common law partner, conjugal partner, children. So you choose what is your case. So I will talk about common law partner. How many family members, including you, are in this application? So if you are only the partner who will be sponsored by the sponsor, so you mention 1. But if you have another like children including in your application, so you mention how many children. If it's 2, so with you including you, it's gonna be 3 people will get sponsored, and etc. Language preference for correspondence, you like to be English or French, so you choose, for example, English. The interview, if they make interview with you, what is the language that you prefer the person who will make interview with you talk to you? So you can choose different language, but I prefer to choose English. Interpreter requested, if you need a translator, yes or no. Where do you intend to live in Canada? So you choose where you live. As a principal applicant, for sure you will live with your sponsor, so it depends where is your sponsor live, so you choose where you want to live. So you choose any province that your sponsor live, and you choose the city. Have you received your certificate CSQ? So regarding CSQ, this is certificate, it's for people who live in Quebec. As we mentioned in my previous videos, for people who live in Quebec, they have to apply for 2 applications, one for Canada and one for Quebec. So for Quebec program, there is a certificate called CSQ. So if you are not applying for Quebec program, so you mention just no and you don't fill the rest. But if you are applying for Quebec, then you choose yes and you mention the other details. Personal details, full name, family names, and given names. And as I mentioned in my previous video, given names, it's not just your first name. Given names, it's your first name, your father name, your maybe grandfather name. It's exactly the way it's mentioned in your passport or travel document. And the family name, it's your last name. Have you ever used any other name? So let's say no. UCI. Okay, so UCI, if you have a visitor visa, if you come to Canada with a visitor visa or a work permit or a study permit, so you have UCI number in your visa. So you need to mention this UCI number: sex, height, eye color, date of birth, place of birth, country, citizenship, in which country you are citizen, current country of residence. So current country of residence, as we are talking about common law partner sponsorship inside Canada, so the principal applicant now he is living inside of Canada, so the country of residence by now it's Canada. Status, you choose, are you a citizen, For sure not, because you are principal applicant, permanent resident, no. So you choose if you are a visitor, worker, student, other. So you choose what is your status, and you mention from which date to which date. Date and the place of your last entry to Canada. So if you have visited Canada for multiple times, so when was the last time you entered to Canada? If it's your first time in Canada, so you mention the date you are now in Canada. Previous country of residence. So if in the past 5 years have you lived in any other countries, so you choose yes or no. Other than the country of citizenship or your current country of residence. So maybe we say no. If yes, you need to mention where you have been living before for past 5 years. Your current marital status. Are you common law, married, divorced, separated, single? So you mention what is your marital status. If you are married or in a common law relationship, provide the date in which you were married or entered into the common law relationship. So here, if you are talking about spouse, you mention the date that you got married. If you are talking about common law relationship, so you need to mention the date that you enter the common law relationship. And the same as I mentioned in my previous video, that common law relationship, it must be two people, the couples, living together for minimum 1 year. So you enter the common law relationship for minimum 1 year from the day that you apply for the sponsorship. Provide the name of your current spouse, common law partner, family name, given names. Have you previously been married or in a common law relationship? So if yes, you mention other details of the person you were in common law relationship or married before. If no, then there is no more details. Contact information. So for contact information, there is mailing address. So if the government want to send you any documents, so what is the mailing address to receive the documents? Residential address, same as mailing address. If it's the same, you mention yes. If it's not, you mention no, and you mention your other details, but it's better to be the same. Telephone, you mention Canada, and you mention the type of the telephone number you are using. Alternate telephone number, the same. You choose Canada and what type of the telephone number. Fax, it's not important. If you don't have any fax, it's okay. Email address is very important, so you have to make sure that your email is accurate so the government can send you any request, any documents, any informations. So this is very important, the email address. Passport. Do you have a valid passport? Travel documents? Supposed to be yes. Passport travel document number as shown in your passport or travel document. You need to mention the passport number, current country of issue, which country issued your passport, issue date, expiry date. For this trip, will you use a passport issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan? No. For this trip, will you use a national Israel passport? Also no. National identity documents. So for some countries, there is a card called national identity documents. So you need to mention the details of this card. Do you have national identity documents? If you have it, you mention yes. If no, then you mention no. If yes, you need to mention document number, country of issue, issue date, and expiry date. Education. As a principal applicant, so you need to mention what is highest level of education you had, secondary, non-university, post-secondary. So master, you mention what is your highest level of education, number of years of education in total. So this is very important because For this point, you have to mention all of year of education since you enter school, high school, and if you go to university, if you go to college. So it's all elementary, secondary, university, college, all of your educational period of your life. Current occupation. So your current occupation, if you are student, you mention student. If you are worker, you mention what type of work you do. If you are visitor, you mention visitor. Intended occupation. So it depends. If you are a visitor and when you get your permanent residency, you will work as engineer, for example. So you mention engineer. If you are a student and you will work as a graphic designer, so you mention a graphic designer. So it depends on what is your current occupation, and after this current occupation finish, then what is intended occupation. But if you are a worker, for example, and you already work as engineer, so you mention engineer and engineer. So it depends on your case. Language details. What is your mother language? Are you able to communicate in English and French? So you mention if you are able to communicate in both or just one of them. And if you communicate in both, which language are you most at ease? You mention French or English. Have you taken a test from a designated testing agency to assess your proficiency in English or French? As you know, guys, there is IELTS test and there is also French test. So if you have taken those or one of those tests, you can mention yes. If no, it's no. This is not obligatory. Dependent. You must provide the following details about each of your family member, whether they will be accompanying you to Canada or not. So, if you have any children depending on you, they will come with you to Canada or not. You have to mention their details. You must include your spouse or common law partner if applicable, and all of your dependent children and those of your spouse or common law partner who are not already permanent resident or citizen of Canada. So this section is only applicable on your spouse, partner, or children that they will come with you to Canada or they will not come with you to Canada. So you need to fill their information, their name, family name, the same UCI number, sex, height, eye color, date of birth, place of birth, citizenship, relation to the principal applicant, they will come with you to Canada or not, current country of residence, date and place of your last entry to Canada, previous countries of residence, have you previously been married or in a common law relationship, all the details, the passport number, national identity document, education, language. So all of those informations, the same, you fill for yourself as a principal applicant. If you have any children, they are coming with you, then you need to fill all of those informations for all of your children. If you don't have any dependent children, so you just choose remove dependent. You see, if you see, there is no this section anymore if you don't have any dependent. So guys, for this form, it's very important, as you see here, consent and declaration of applicant. So here you admit that all the information that you mention in your form, it's accurate and it's correct, and you give the right for the immigration people who work on the CIC or in the Canadian government to check your information if it's right or not. So, do you consent to be contacted by CIS or an organization at CIS request in the future? So you need to mention yes. If they want to contact you, if they want to check that all the information you mentioned it's correct. So here, consent to release information to intended province territory of destination. So also all the informations here, different government parts, they will maybe transfer your information to different part of the government. So you have to approve or confirm this point. So here you need to mention your first name and last name, but we can't write this, we can't type this on the computer. So after you print out this form, you need to write your first name, last name by pen on this section. It's very important, guys, don't forget. Consent to release information for evaluation purpose. I agree that the information contained in this application related to my intended occupation, education, and work experience may be shared with prospective employers in order to assist them in hiring workers. So it's the same, and if you want to work in the future and the employer he wants to check your background, so you have to mention also yes, because it must be accurate and the true information you mention in your form. So you can read here also all the details about you confirm that all informations are accurate and are correct. After this, guys, here I declare that the information I have given is truthful, complete, and correct. So you need here to sign and mention the date. So guys, as you see, we have a button called validate. I talked about this button, validation button, in my previous video. So after you fill all the information in this form, you click on validation button. So here it must be say yes. If it said no, this means that there is something not accurate or in the date, or it's something you forgot to fill in the form. So if it's everything is alright, then validated, it must mention here yes, and this form will generate another barcode. So we have 4 pages, so it's gonna generate another extra pages. It has a barcode, and also as I mentioned in my previous video, I will talk about barcode in a different video when we talk about complete and basic guide for sponsorship. But you need to be aware that validation, it must be yes, and it must generate extra pages with a barcode, and don't forget to sign and mention the date that you fill this form. And for the signature also you use your pen, because it doesn't type here on the computer. So let's go for the second form for the principal applicant. Additional dependence declaration form. So guys, we talked about the dependent part of the previous form. So if you have more dependent children and the previous form doesn't fit all your dependents, so you can come to this form and you fill the more or additional dependents, and it's the same information: the family name, the given name, the sex, height, date of birth, citizen, if they have current country of residence, date and the place of last entry to Canada, current marital status, previously been married or in common law, passport information, identity document information, education information, language details, and the consent part that you agree or you confirm that all the information you mentioned in this part is accurate and correct, and you sign, you mention the date. So this is for additional dependents. So let's go for the third form. Additional family information. So this form is more about your family, your mother, your father, sisters, brothers. But you need to know a little bit about certain points and important points in this form. First, you need to complete all names in English and your native language. Second, if additional space is required, attach separate sheet. What does this mean? This means that if there is more information you need to fill in this form but there is no space, so what you do is print out the extra page that you need to fill out, and then you fill this page, and after this you write on the top of the form which point that you are filling and which number of this point, and you sign and mention the date. I will mention example later. If a section doesn't apply, write just not applicable. So here, section A, as you see, there is the name of the applicant, the name of the spouse or the partner, mother name, and father name. So you have to mention the names in English and in your native language. Here, date of birth, country of birth, and the present address you mention, and their email. But it's okay if they don't have email address, it's okay. It will not affect your application. Section B, children. You need to mention all the sons and daughters, including all adopted and stepchildren, regardless of age or place of residence. The same, you mention the names and your native language and English, relationship, what they are son, daughter, adopted, stepchildren, date of birth, country of birth, and present address. And for email address also, it's not obligatory, but you need to mention not applicable if there is no email address. You don't keep the space empty. You have to mention not applicable in any section that is not applicable. Brothers and sisters, including half and step brothers and sister, it's the same information. I certify that the information contained in this document is complete, accurate, and factual. So you sign here, you mention the date that you fill the form. So for example, if you have many children or many brothers and sisters, more than 1, 2, 3, there is here 3 space. So if you have more than 3 brothers and sisters and you need to mention them in this form, so what you do is you open another form like this form and you fill only this part that you need, and you keep the rest empty because you already filled this part. So you fill this extra part and you print out only this section, extra section, and you put this section with your form, and on the top of the paper you write by pen just that. You can write section C, brothers and sisters, and you mention your name and the date. So the person in the government, when he review your application, he see that you have extra information on this page. So let's go now to the fourth form. Schedule A, background declaration. This form is very important, guys. So the principal applicant has to fill this form. As you see, you need to mention your UCI number, application number. You keep it empty because you don't know your application number yet because you didn't submit your application yet. Personal details, family name, given names, date of birth, personal details of your parents, father and your mother, their family name, given name, city of birth, country of birth, date of birth, etc. So, have you, or if you are the principal applicant, any of your family members listed in your application for permanent residence in Canada ever? Been convicted of a crime? So you mentioned no. Been convicted or are you currently charged with a crime offense? No. Made a previous claim for refugee protection in Canada or at a Canadian visa office abroad in any other country or countries or with the United Nations? So let's say no. It depends on your case if you applied for being a refugee before or not, but most cases no. Been refused refugee status or an immigrant or permanent resident visa, including CSQ, or application to the provincial community program or visitor or temporary resident visa to Canada or any other country. So this point is very important. So guys, if you applied for a visitor visa or any kind of application to Canada before or to any other country before, and you got refused, you need to declare this and mention yes. If no, then you mention no, but if it's yes, so you have to mention yes. Been refused admission to or ordered to leave Canada or any other country, supposed to be no. Been involved in an act of genocide, a war crime, no. Used, planned, or advocated the use of armed struggle, let's say no. Been associated with a group that used, advocated the use of armed struggle, violence, etc., politics, no. Been a member of an organization that is engaged in an activity that is part of criminal activity, no. Been put in jail, say no. Had any serious disease or physical or mental disorder, no. If you answer to any of these questions yes, provide details below. So guys, if you answer yes for any of those questions, yes, you need to provide more details about your situation, especially if you applied before to a visitor visa or work permit or study visa for Canada or any other country and you have been refused. So you need to mention those details. You need to be honest and need to be mentioned the accurate and the real informations. Education history provide the number of years of school you successfully completed for each level. Primary, secondary, university, other post-secondary. Okay, give full details of all the secondary and post-secondary education, including university, college, and any other training you have had. So guys, in this point, you mention from the most recently to the last thing. And you see, you need to mention your secondary and post-secondary like university or any training you had. So you need to mention the date from the most recent thing to the old thing. From the date to the date or ongoing, level of education, field of study, name of school or institution, certificate and diploma issued, city, country, province. So if you are talking about the secondary, so level of education, secondary, field of study, secondary, you mention your name of the school, certificate and diploma issued, it's secondary. If you are talking about university level of education, for example, baccalaureate degree, field of study, for example, engineer, civil engineer, you mention the name of the university, certificate and diploma issued, like baccalaureate, for example, and city, country, province. Any section that is not applicable, you can just mention not applicable. Personal history. Provide the details of your personal history since the age of 18, the past 10 years, whichever is the most recent. So for personal history, they mean your employment or working history. So the same, you have to start with the most recent. So for example, if you are here in Canada as a visitor, you mention from to and activity type. For example, unemployed, job or activity title or position, you mention just visitor, status in the country, you mention you are visitor, citizen, whatever, name, not applicable, city, country, preference. If you are working, you mention the date from this date to this date, activity, for example, you mention employed, job or activity position, for example, graphic designer, status in the country, maybe you are citizen or permanent residence, it depends, name of the company, city, country. So guys, you mention the last 10 years or from the age of 18 what you were doing as employment, or if you were not employed, so what are you doing? If you are not working, you provide information on what you were doing in this time. You were unemployed, you were studying, traveling, retired. So you mention in details, and it's very important to have no gap. Please ensure that you don't leave any gap in time. Membership or association with any organization. So if you have any, in the past you have been a member of any organization, politics, student organization or anything, you mention yes. If no, it's no. Have you held any governmental position? Yes, no. Let's say mention no. If yes, you need to mention the details. Military also, if you have been, yes, no. Let's say mention no. If yes, you need to mention the details. Addresses. Provide all addresses where you have lived in the past 10 years since your 18th birthday, which is more recent. Do not exclude any period of time during this time frame. So here you need to mention all of your addresses, and again there is no gap, and you start with the most recent. So for example, since we are talking about common law partnership inside Canada, so you need to mention from to, or it's ongoing because you already live in Canada. You mention where you live, your address in Canada, and the city, you mention the city in Canada, the country here, it must be Canada. And then if you were living, for example, in France, so you mention from to and your address when you were living in France, like Paris, France, etc. And if you have different addresses in when you were living in France, so you mention the different addresses that you have. And as you see here, there's add more rows if you have multiple addresses, but you need to be aware that your most recent address, since we are talking about common law from inside Canada, so it must be a Canadian address, and the rest of the addresses, it depends where you have been living before coming to Canada. So here you have to confirm that all the informations you mentioned, they are correct and accurate. So for this form, there is very important point in this form. So we need to know that for this form, it's the only form that you need to type your name in this section, and then you sign after you print out the form. So for example, you have this space, you write your name. So you write your name here, for example, first name and family name, and then you mention a date, and then you do validation. After this, you print out the form and you sign by a pen next to your name here. So it's very important to be careful about this point. This is the first thing, that you need to write your name, then print out the form, and then you need to sign by a pen. The second thing, you see there is a validation bottom. So for the previous two forms, when you click on this validation button, there is a barcode will be generated after the pages of the form. But this form, when you do validation, there is no barcode. It's only mentioned here, validated yes. But you have to be careful that there is no barcode. So if it doesn't generate barcode, it's okay because there is no barcode. It does just mention here yes. So that's it for this application. So let's go for the last form on this application. So this is the last form in the principal applicant application, use of a representative. But as I mentioned also in my previous video, that this form we don't need to fill because we don't use any immigration consultant or lawyer to fill our forms and to prepare for our application. So that's it for my video for today. I hope it's useful and everything is clear, and if you need any question or help in any point, you can mention this in the comment below. And if you would like to know more about different informations about sponsorship application and other informations about different things about Canada, please subscribe and like my videos so you will be updated more and more about what I will do in my channel, and it's all related to beautiful Canada. Thank you.